Hi. Welcome to the mashup of the Teaching Excellence Podcast and
FEresearchpodcast.
So, Stef Wilkinson, for those who don't know me, and this is Fletcher-Saxon. And we had a little crazy idea because we realised we only live like 5 minutes from each other, that we would record a podcast / vlog whilst we went on a walk. So, hi Joe, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm good, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, thanks. We're not quite sure what the sound quality will be like, but we're we decided it doesn't need to be perfect, and we're just gonna chat all things education, and we debated a couple of topics. As you may know, Joe won an award yesterday, didn't you, Joe?
I did.
Tell people what you won.
Futurist's Excellence in Research.
Yeah, she did. So congrats for Joe for that. And our other close friend Lou Mycroft, she won the EduFuturists category for staff wellbeing for all of the work that she does alongside the stuff that we've been doing in Joy FE. Probably best to say what Joy FE is all about, because we always get asked that question. So, which will then link on to what we'll talk about today. So, we're making sure we don't walk too quick. Otherwise, we're going to get out of breath, and that's never gonna be great. So yeah, Joy FE, very quickly, was a movement, I suppose. It was a group of people that came together through lockdown, just to talk about how lockdown might affect education and move things forward. So that's the briefest version. Everyone's welcome to come and join us, obviously, and there's lots of conversations that happen about all sorts of things, but Joe's just navigating where we're going, and I'm doing my best not to get run over. So linked really to a lot of the conversations that have happened in Joy FE, one of the things that keeps cropping up is values driven leadership, and we thought we might start there. We've not scripted anything, so we thought we might start there. So where should we start?
Okay, so tell me your values as a leader then.
Well, big question to start with, but it's important. I was listening to something this morning which talks about individual values and organisational values, and I actually really like that as a place to start, because I think colleges often have a set of values, don't they?
Yeah.
That everyone sort of knows if they're part of the college, and they drive theoretically what happens and what we do in college, or in education for that matter, or in any business. I would say, and I've got some work to do on this actually to articulate, but my values are around collaboration and unity. That one took me a while to figure out, but I realised that I'm all about bringing people together. I am also about innovation and transformation, so I'm constantly thinking about where the edges of the comfort zone are, and thinking about how can we change what we do in education and how can we move it forwards. And for me, I think some people think that I'm just doing it for the sake of it, but actually once I've explained the rationale, it's about always moving things forward to make the world a better place, I suppose, which is very idealistic, but they're the things that really motivate me. So what about you?
I think when you asked me about this, do you know what this is, by the way?
No.
What would you call this?
This, I'd call this, there's a debate, isn't there? It's either an alleyway or a pathway or a ginnel.
It's a snicket.
A what?
It's a snicket.
Okay, we're on a snicket. This is a snicket for those who...
It's a snicket.
Maybe aren't from... Is it a Yorkshire thing?
Probably.
Okay, what is the snicket?
If you said the snicket, people would know you meant here.
Okay,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah. So,
Love that.
I think mine are, when you asked me, there are two that came to mind. And first is honesty.
Yeah.
And the reason why I know that is a real ethic or value, values are ethics enacted, aren't they? Is when people are dishonest, it really, really gets to me. And that's how I know how strong that is for me.
Yeah.
I almost found it by the reverse. If a student is dishonest even with themselves, I couldn't get that assignment in, or a colleague or something. Yeah, it really bothers me. So that's how I know that that's absolutely core, but it can lead to trouble because sometimes you have to be softer how you present honesty, I think. Not be too harsh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is some people use that as a defence, don't they? They say, well, I'm prepared to be honest with you, and they're quite brutal in delivery.
Yeah.
And the rationale is that they're being honest with you. And actually, very recently, I recognised that was a way of someone who was trying to look out for me would deliver me the very honest truth that was actually quite sometimes felt harsh, but when you dig down, if it's about trying to help someone move forward rather than bring them down, then I think that's it's just about how you deliver it. But it's interesting actually, like you said. Which way should we go, Jo?
We'll go that way.
Yeah. It's interesting actually that we don't really teach values, and this is what I've been thinking about this morning actually, is we don't necessarily teach values, but it's quite a heavy, well, it doesn't have to be heavy, but it's quite big, isn't it? It feels very big.
It's big, and I think it's taken me years to actually work it out.
What's your other one actually?
My other one, right, is courage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that.
And again, I think I found that by default.
Okay.
And I think because we were talking about values in terms of leadership, weren't we?
Yeah.
And I think, and it's not to say that not everybody has courage, everybody does, but I think when you want to stick your head above the parapet in a leadership role, it really takes quite a lot of courage, really, because you get backlash, you get really awful conversations to handle, and I how some people will say, okay, well, you can be an effective teacher or you might struggle, and therefore that it's not for you. I think everybody thinks they can do leadership. Controversially, I'm not sure that is the case, and it's not about people's abilities at all. I think everybody give it a good go, fine. I think, or my belief in the last few years is, not everybody is at the right time or place to be really ballsy and hold on to that bit of courage, I think.
And yeah, it's interesting actually you say that, because there are a lot of things to navigate in leadership that take real courage, and actually living to your values takes real courage, because if your values are not, or are compromised, or your values are, there's some sort of rub with your values, it can be courageous to be able to talk about that. But I think that's a real interesting bit of leadership, is having the courage to have the conversations that are maybe hard. but need to happen. And for me, it's always about, if I'm doing anything courageous, it's about the greater good, and it's about doing the right thing for the staff, or for the students, or for the college as a whole. And I think there's a lot more courageous leadership visible on Twitter, say.
Really?
I think compared to a while ago, but I think there's also, Twitter is very complex.
Yeah, I think Twitter's a bubble.
Yes, I agree.
And I know many brilliant teachers, educators, support workers, leaders that don't go near Twitter, and I think that is dangerous about social media groups. I've started using LinkedIn more lately as well. Different group of people there.
Yeah.
But I think you can be drawn into believing that bubble is the
reality.
sum total of reality.
Yeah, I'm the same. Twitter and LinkedIn are very different groups of people, which I quite like actually.
Yeah.
But it is about it's not the sum total of reality. But yeah, I think this conversation about values is an interesting one, because the way that someone pitched it this morning I was listening to an audiobook, was just start by asking the question, what matters to you?
Yes.
And I think we could ask our students that as well, and I think we do ask our students that at times, but maybe we project what matters to us quite a lot on our students. I know I probably did, looking back at times, when it comes to, originally I was teaching equine science and equine nutrition and physiology, and I have quite strong beliefs about certain things, so I probably projected that quite a lot, but always for the greater good of welfare and things like that, but so yeah, I think starting in that place of what matters. And
I think I was just thinking, if you ask my 12-year-old
yeah,
what matters, I think he'd talk about gaming.
Yeah.
But if you strip back what's underneath that's about connection, social interaction, valuing friendships, having fun. It's about more than it seems, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it may be that, particularly having that conversation with young people, you won't hear the things that you label values necessarily straight up.
But that's the work to do, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's finding the way, and I was thinking about it. Like I say, it's very current for me, and I'm going to work on this a little bit this week. Is how do we help people to dig underneath the initial answers to that question, to start to dig into what we would maybe categorise as values, because the little bit of reading and research that I've done is that if we can align, if we know what our values are, then the choices that we make are sometimes much easier, and we can be much more calm and peaceful in our decisions.
They won't always align, will they? They won't always align.
No.
I think, okay, so my drive for honesty, I will find that, like I said, difficult at times, so we just will not align. There may be times where I can't have a conversation with somebody yet because all the things have to be in place. Or, so actually, one of the ways to identify it might also be how you feel when things are misaligned.
And I like that, what you said about you probably realised honesty was more important, was really important to you when the opposite happened.
Yeah.
And I think that is a way of, because sometimes people might not know where to start in terms of what matters to me. I think you get there a bit more easier through different experiences. But there are probably times where if you think about what really doesn't align with you, or what are the things that drive you mad or make you angry or make you feel
you may reach them
yeah.
yeah
And I think that is a way to start to think about what is it that really irritates you, and then what's the opposite of that. And I think what's interesting is, in terms of what I listened to this morning, was that they said subconsciously, whether we know what our values are or not, they will have driven a lot of our actions today.
That's the point, isn't it? So it's the ethics, it's the values enacted, and that's where you see it in the behaviours and the emotions. They'll be evident there. Oh, we're just pausing for a car.
We're just navigating a reversing car who may have gone the wrong way.
I think there's a train there as well.
Oh yeah, we'll show you the Shepley train station.
So shall I tell you what I've been reading?
Yes, please. Well, I'm just going to get a little view of the train station. It's a beautiful part of York.
Yeah. This one isn't called a snicket.
This is not a snicket. This is a
lane.
A lane, yeah.
So, because of the FE Research Podcast, so I was looking at the whole business of walking, interviewing and talking.
Cool.
And I think sometimes in research world they're called go-alongs. You go along with the person you're, asking questions of or whatever.
Yeah.
And I was looking at what the benefits might be of having a conversation like this, as opposed to in a classroom. Talk to students or stuff. And it says, doing something like this, it transcends literally the boundaries of that space, and that kind of frees up your mind to think in a different way.
I like that.
I did think, I thought, gosh, what it made me think about, we ask our students to, and our staff to take on surveys and things.
Yeah.
But what different information would we get if we, walked and had a conversation? I wonder.
And that's why we did this. It came up in an ideas room, didn't it?
Yeah.
About a walking and talking, a conversation that wasn't sat down in a room.
Or in a Zoom room.
Or in a Zoom room, actually, yeah. And there's lots of thinking going on about that as well at the minute. But we just thought, well, we'll have a go. We'll have a go,
so
and here we are.
What do you think the difference is?
I think that, well, I know personally I'm a bit of an outdoorsy person, so I do think there isn't as much of a restriction. Thank you. For me, I feel much freer outside, and I would say that probably is reflected in my thinking, although obviously I've never compared the two, because I quite like to think. So, but I think that the other bit is that there's no intensity at the minute. I haven't really looked at you very much, and I suppose that's because I'm trying to make sure.
But again, so some of the literature talks about, as a parent of a 12-year preteen, probably one of the most confrontational things I could do with my son is be eye to eye with him.
Okay.
So where he's more likely to talk is in the car when we're not eye to eye.
Yeah.
So I think not dissimilar. Walking. I mean, can you imagine it? I was thinking, what was I reading? It's about what you can pick up from doing something like this is lived experience. And people like Kay Syboston use the term embodied, don't they? Embodied. So if you were walking with a student, you would, I think, get a feel for their lived experience in that space. I don't mean follow them around like those observations we used to do.
Yeah.
I don't mean that. But if you've worked at a really big college, haven't you?
Yeah.
Ours is very small, but even in the small college that I'm in, there are some spaces I never go to, never.
Yeah.
So how could I say as a leader, I know the lived experience of students using that social space, and we make judgments about how the money's spent on that social space. So
yeah, I like that.
Think about.
Yeah, I like that, because we do need to just, and that lockdown has prompted education generally to try and think about things differently. And there are some people really hoping for change, and there are some people really worried that their school or their college will just go back to how it was. And there is a lot of educators who have been worked really hard, and they do so in the what's the word? In the vein of making a difference, but I think where we've seen in lockdown that it's instigated a conversation that is, how can we do these things better for greater good of students or greater good of teaching staff. But yeah, I like that, rethinking how we make decisions and thinking about how do we think differently, or how can we create the conditions to think differently so that we can be even better at what we did or what we do. And this is interesting, just walking and just exploring concepts. I like it. So I suppose if we go back to values.
Yeah, okay.
Well,
I'll tell you the third thing I was going to talk about,
yes.
which I think relates to what you've been part of creating in lockdown. Obviously the joyful militancy. That's what I wanted to talk about, joyful militancy.
Okay.
I think that would be my third thing.
And what does that mean exactly, Jo?
Well, I think you don't always have to accept the status quo. And I've had lots of conversations with people during lockdown who seem to believe they had to.
It's interesting you should mention this, because it actually, on a Saturdays, occasionally, well not occasionally, but whoever wants to have a brew from the Joy FE group, we have a brew. This came up this morning.
Oh, right, okay.
So the concept of just accepting what is.
Yeah.
So what's been your thinking on that recently?
I think it's a bit back to that courage, really, or people realising they can. You know, I think so. Some of the conversations, sometimes it's about knowledge, not knowing how to do something. But sometimes it's about bravery and courage, and you know, I don't know. Somehow you're realising yourself. You can ask questions. You can make suggestions. You don't wait. Don't wait. For lots of women who wait for an answer, wait for an opportunity. It tends to be women. Don't know why. This might be who I speak to. But I'm all about joyfully creating your own opportunities.
Yeah, I agree. Just thinking about where we're going to go. Yeah, because if we go on the main road, it might get too noisy.
I brought something to read.
Okay. Right,
Windy.
It's a bit windy, but so we'll have a pause
Right. Okay.
and read it.
So there's a book called Joyful Militancy, and it's by Nick Montgomery and Carla Bergman.
Okay.
And in the beginning of the book there's a quote, and I love this quote and I use it a lot. And I think it kind of resonates with lockdown. To everyone in cramped spaces and stifling atmospheres, letting in fresh air and finding the wiggle room, embracing messiness and mistakes together, learning to move with fierce love and uncertainty, making us capable of something new. I think
if I can't speak because that's just blown my socks off a bit, Joe, if I'm honest, and I don't want to cry on camera.
Don't you think that's what's been happening? I think
Absolutely love that, because there's a couple of things that are standing out in my head. One is the wiggle room,
which I love, and that's what I mean about finding the space, finding the opportunity. Organisations thrive on the people. It's not the building.
Yeah.
It's not actually the policies really. It's the people. And I think that's what we all need to be doing in post 16. Is finding the wiggle room.
Yeah, it is the people, and this seems to be a bit of a theme that's cropping up in lots of different conversations and spaces at the minute, which is it has to be people centered. Like, when I say it, I just mean anything almost has to be people centered. So whatever you're doing in the world has to be people centered, because that's all there is, really.
Yes, yeah.
And I love that letting in the fresh air and finding the wiggle room is what has been happening and people have been trying to do. And it was such a welcomed letting in of the fresh air, because I think education was really struggling, and you know, FE has struggled.
Stifling atmosphere.
Yes.
Yeah.
And it was almost like, well, it has been, it's unbearable, the, you know, teacher retention issues and all of that sort of thing, and the difficulties to recruit, and you know, that's where it's been really tough. And I'm not saying that it's never going to not be a challenge, because you know, educating and contributing to educating people is a really important job, a really big responsibility. But at the same time, we have to try and find the wiggle room for change, and there's lots of different reasons to do that, isn't there? But what I also like about what you've just read is and I forget the quote exactly, but is being there in the mess together.
Yeah, in the messiness. That's what,
Yeah.
There's another thing. I think you need to accept a certain amount of messiness. We talk about messy research actually, but it's the same in working in education. There is an element of chaos. You never know about, you know, the dynamics between people, and there is messiness. And I think we have to be comfortable in the messiness sometimes.
I agree. And I think there's a few things popping in my head actually. And one is, a while ago people would say I was a bit of a perfectionist. But for one reason or another, I've got to this place where I trust, especially the podcast, I trust what will come out.
Yeah.
And I trust, so I don't, and I accept the messiness.
Yeah.
So I don't sort of overthink it, and I do think about it beforehand, and I think whatever I choose to talk about or want to talk to people about is things that I'm really passionate about or that interest me. But I'm okay if the conversation just goes off and round and takes a form of its own.
So in research world, one of the things I put on Twitter is that you and I were going on a derive.
Oh yeah, I didn't know what that meant.
Yeah. So derive, it's like, it comes from psychogeography.
Okay.
So I think it was somebody called De Boer wrote about this. But that would be, if we were doing a derive, we would wander without aim or purpose and engage with our environment and see where our thinking went.
Ooh.
Sort of doing that.
Yeah. I agree. I like it, and I think potentially I would argue at the minute, just changing little arm position, where I've got achy arm, is that potentially I would argue that, I don't know if I'd say best thinking, but definitely different thinking, not confined, the opposite of not confined, free thinking may happen in a space where you wander and chat.
Yeah. I've made a note actually to ask you about where you think you do your best thinking. I'm not sure exactly thinking, but I'll tell you where lots of my ideas come to me: in the shower.
There's a theory though for that.
Is there?
Yes. And I'm probably going to get this wrong, but it's to do with when you feel relaxed and your mind calms from the to-do list and the physical going about of what you need to actually achieve or you think you need to achieve, and when you're in a space where that to-do list kind of falls away, it gives room for your...
Right, so I think that's a bit like the walking.
Yeah.
Very similar thing.
Yes.
I had a meeting, obviously an audio one in lockdown, with somebody, and rather than Zoom, she said, will you call me? So I called her. It's Mel from Faircroft. She might watch this. And she was panting, so I knew she wasn't at her desk. She was walking, and she said she started doing that. So doing meetings while she's walking.
Yeah.
That's another thing. Now it was a bit unusual for me because I was sat at my desk, so I found it quite distracting hearing the fact that she was walking. And then other people walked past her and they became part of the conversation, like, oh hi, how are you? I was like, oh, that wouldn't normally happen, would it?
No.
But you know, I guess I didn't ask her exactly why, but it might be partly exercise and things, but walking meetings. Okay.
Yeah. I think there's something to think about, because I think in lockdown one of the toughest things has been a lot of meetings that are on a screen and potentially a lot of hours sat on a chair of some sort. Talking to other people, but there's something about walking and talking, and especially if you've got a one-to-one type meeting, there's nothing stopping you from it being
no. We always feel we need to write something down, I think, don't we? Let me minute it. When really, no, you could jot down later your key action points, couldn't you?
I think the coming back to the values driven leadership, and we'll probably end up doing a couple of these to talk about different things, but I think if you unpick all motivations, they're probably, now when it comes to this space of rethinking education, we've got to actually, values and motives become really important, don't they? And I think we have to, well, it's my opinion, that connection and people need to become, a real part of that rationale and the values of any organisation, really. Because what we can't do, we can't just talk about improving education for a certain group of people. It has to be about improving education for everybody. And it just reminded me actually of, I think it's Johnny Utley, he's part of the Collective Ed Advisory Board.
Yeah.
He's just written a book, or he's been part of writing a book that is called Putting Staff First instead of putting students first. And I think there's something in there about
the things that are going to have the most impact on student success is the staff. Absolutely.
So let's summarise some of our thinking. Actually, we've gone all over the place a little bit. But for me, I think the next bit of what I'm going to go away and do is work out how I can help people to look at their values and recognise their values, but then also link that to organisational values, and how the types of processes that might be mapped into professional thinking and possibly even a research approach to professional development.
Right.
I think that's something that I'm going to weigh and have a little look at.
Right. Well, I think for me, keep finding the wiggle room.
Yes.
But I do, as you know, I'm trying to build up opportunities for staff to be engaged in action research work.
Yeah.
So there's still lots to do there, because only a few people, each year have said they're up for it, and you wonder what's going on there. People worry about time and and all that kind of thing. So that's my job of work. Is ownership of professional development. Who owns it, and it should be us.
Yeah. And I think that might be something that I'd be really interested in talking to you about next time, is that ownership of professional development and potential resistance to that.
It's new, isn't it? It's about change. I know it was about 2 years ago when we asked colleagues, the kind of things they might be interested in. We certainly had one response that said, well, that's your job, you tell us what's off. But that's perhaps an understandable response when you've had a defined menu each year. That's quite understandable.
Yeah.
So, like any change,
Yeah.
it takes time.
Yeah, it does. So, we could probably walk and talk forever, but we'll bring this episode to a close. We potentially might do a series, visit different places in Yorkshire, and just talk about the things that are cropping up and seem to be happening or being discussed.
I've got another thing to read.
Oh yes, let's end with a reading. Let's do this.
So this one's for you.
Okay.
Okay. Right. I had to write it down because I can't remember. Okay. This is Khalil Gilbrand.
Khalil Gibran.
That's
Love him.
Yeah. Your joy is your sorrow unmasked. Some of you say joy is greater than sorrow, and others say sorrow is the greater. But I say unto you, they are inseparable. Together they come, and when one sits alone with you at the board, or at your board, remember that the other is asleep upon your bed.
I love that. Thank you so much, Jo. And we'll leave you with that one. I love to think about those types of things and what it really means, or what it means to us in this moment and this time. So, from the Teaching Excellence podcast and
the FE Research podcast,
we will hopefully see you again soon. Bye everyone.